Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone, and a special welcome to you, the learner. Today, we are getting into something that honestly totally shifts how I think about health.
Oh, absolutely. It is a complete paradigm shift.
Right, because, for so long, we've all been handed this very specific, very rigid calculator when it comes to our bodies.
The whole calories in, calories out ledger.
Exactly. The math is supposed to be incredibly simple, like the basic accounting. You just balance the ledger, subtract the calories, and boom, you reach your health goal.
Yeah, which sounds great on paper.
It sounds perfect, it's clean, it's predictable, but it completely ignores how your body actually works. Because if you look at human endocrinology, that simple calculator starts throwing massive error messages.
Huge error messages.
So today, we are cracking the code on true metabolic health for 2026. We're looking at this fascinating YouTube transcript from The Diary of a CEO featuring world-renowned metabolic and fat cell scientist Dr. Benjamin Bickman.
Yeah, his research is it's groundbreaking.
It really is. And we're going to explore why that old math problem is fundamentally flawed, why one specific hormone basically dictates your entire energy system, and how drinking a compound that literally tastes like caustic hair bleach might actually lower your blood pressure.
Which is still wild to me. But I think it's important to clarify right at the top, our mission today isn't to prescribe some rigid one-size-fits-all diet for you.
No, definitely not.
Right. The goal is to help you understand the why behind your metabolism. I want to shift the focus from, starving the body to properly signaling the body's cells.
Because that thermodynamic illusion, the whole eat less, move more thing, it's been around for 60 years?
Yeah, roughly 60 years.
Yeah.
It's this purely calorie-centric paradigm. But treating the human body like a closed system furnace totally ignores biology.
Because calorie restriction alone leads to one inevitable outcome.
Hunger. Crushing physiological hunger. And biologically speaking, hunger always wins.
Always. Think about those extreme weight loss game shows on TV.
Oh, that's the perfect example. You see these contestants lose staggering amounts of weight through just brutal calorie deprivation.
Right. Running on treadmills for hours while eating nothing.
Exactly. But almost all of them gain it back. And people think, they just lack willpower.
Which is so unfair.
It really is, because they aren't failing due to a lack of willpower. Their metabolic rate has literally plummeted, and their hormones are screaming at them to eat.
So if your strategy doesn't address that hormonal environment, you're basically just dragging these heavy chains of hunger around until your biology finally forces you to collapse.
Precisely. You have to fix the environment.
Okay, so if balancing the calorie ledger isn't the primary lever you should pull, what is? Because the research points directly to insulin.
Yes, insulin is the key.
But we usually just think of insulin as the blood sugar manager, right? Like, you eat a donut, insulin deals with the sugar.
Right, but Bickman frames it as the one metabolic hormone to rule them all. Think of insulin as a master switch that tells every single cell in your body what to do with energy.
And its main directive is storage, isn't it?
Yes. When insulin levels are high, it aggressively orders your body to take calories out of the bloodstream and lock them away.
Like putting them in a vault.
Exactly, locking them in your fat cells or your liver. And to ensure that energy gets stored rather than burned, insulin literally slows down your overall metabolic engine. It puts a hard stop on fat burning.
Which leads to this concept that I found totally mind-blowing. The brain starvation paradox.
This is fascinating.
It completely flips how we understand hunger. So the source highlights these studies where people ate isocaloric meals.
Meaning the exact same number of calories.
Right. Same calories, but entirely different macro makeups. So one meal was high carbohydrate, which severely spikes insulin, and the other was low carb, high fat, which keeps insulin quiet.
And the physiological divergence there is just profound. When you eat that high carb, insulin spiking meal, your body follows orders. It pulls the energy out of your blood and securely locks it in your fat tissue.
But the brain doesn't have a big local fat reservoir, right?
No, it doesn't. It relies entirely on the energy that is currently circulating in your bloodstream. So because insulin has simultaneously dropped your blood sugar and stopped your liver from making any alternative fuels, your brain suddenly finds itself without a fuel source.
Okay, think about it like this. Imagine your body is a smartphone. The battery icon says 100%, which represents your stored body fat. You have plenty of power.
Plenty of power to get through the day.
Right. But high insulin is like this glitchy operating system that physically won't let your apps access that battery power.
I love that analogy.
So your brain thinks the phone is dying. It senses critically low energy in the blood and just screams at you to plug it in. It triggers this intense, uncontrollable hunger just a couple of hours after you ate a massive meal.
Yeah, you could have 1,000,000 calories stored on your body in fat cells, but because insulin is elevated, your brain is actively chemically starving.
Wow.
And this phenomenon is so mechanically powerful, we actually see it play out in type 1 diabetics who don't produce their own insulin.
Oh, right, because they don't have the storage key.
Exactly. They can consume tens of thousands of calories, and it is physically impossible for them to get fat. Without insulin acting as the key to unlock the fat cells for storage, the energy just sloshes around in the blood until it gets excreted.
And the source mentions that some people tragically abuse this, right?
Yeah. Sadly, some individuals deliberately underdose their prescribed insulin so they can eat whatever they want and remain dangerously thin. It's a disastrous, life-threatening choice,
Absolutely.
but it perfectly proves the underlying mechanism.
Yeah.
Insulin, not the calorie, is the absolute gatekeeper of your fat tissue.
So if we want to shrink our fat cells, the biochemical mandate for you as a listener is super clear. You have to lower your insulin.
You have to turn off the switch.
And when insulin drops, say after about 16 hours of fasting or restricting carbohydrates, the fat cells undergo this mechanical process called lipolysis.
Right. They literally break open and send their stored fat straight to the liver.
And the liver is kind of like the soccer mom of nutrient metabolism.
That's a great way to put it. It coordinates where all the fuel goes.
Yeah. And when insulin is low, that logistics manager realizes the storage warehouses are closed. It isn't allowed to store that incoming fat, so it's forced to burn it.
And because it's burning such a massive volume of fat, it creates a powerful metabolic byproduct, which are ketones.
Ketones, which are so fascinating because they get treated like this trendy fad diet buzzword, but clinically, they are actually the brain's preferred fuel.
They really are. And there's a striking medical history here.
Yeah, ketogenic diets have been used since childhood to treat people with severe neurological conditions. We're talking epilepsy, Alzheimer's, even bipolar disorder. The central nervous system fundamentally thrives when it's running on ketones.
And the benefits extend far beyond the brain. The heart is actually the second biggest consumer of ketones in the body.
Which brings us to that pig heart study.
Oh, this study is incredible. So they looked at pig hearts, which are anatomically very similar to human hearts. Researchers infused the cardiovascular system with a specific type of ketone called LBHB.
And what happened?
Instantly, the heart was able to pump 40% more blood with every single beat.
Wait, 40%? That is massive. And the wild part is that the heart wasn't working harder or beating faster to achieve that volume.
Not at all. It all comes down to vasodilation. The ketone physically caused the great arteries, like the aorta, to expand.
Okay.
By widening the vessels, it drastically reduced the resistance the heart had to pump against.
It's like turning a narrow garden hose into a fire hose.
Exactly. It allowed the heart to move massive amounts of blood effortlessly.
Which perfectly explains that crazy story from Dr. Bickman. He was dealing with intense stress, really poor sleep, and his blood pressure spiked to a concerning 139/90.
Right, which is unusually high for him.
So he takes a shot of pure, unflavored LBHB ketone ester, which, by the way, is notoriously foul. Like, it burns, it's bitter, it tastes like hair bleach.
Just awful stuff to drink.
But within an hour, his blood pressure plummeted to a perfect 110/70.
It is a staggering real-world application of that exact vasodilation mechanism we saw in the pig hearts.
Okay, but hold on. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
If the whole point of this metabolic approach is for you to burn your own stored body fat to create these ketones, isn't drinking a shot of lab-made exogenous ketones basically cheating?
Cheating how?
Like, isn't it pouring a bucket of sweat on yourself and claiming you just worked out? Does consuming them actually fix your underlying metabolic machinery, or is it just a temporary chemical hack?
That is such a good question, and that tension right there reveals the dual nature of ketones. They are not just a passive energy source waiting to be burned.
Okay.
They are actually incredibly potent signaling molecules.
Interesting.
Yeah, when beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB, enters your bloodstream, whether you made it internally or drank it from a bottle, it binds to specific receptors on the outside of your cells. It acts just like a hormone.
So it's actively commanding the body to do something.
Yes. It commands the body to reduce cellular inflammation, dilate those blood vessels, and even turn down anxiety signals in the brain.
Oh, wow. So while drinking them doesn't mean you magically burned your own fat, the signaling cascade, like that massive drop in blood pressure,
Huh.
is a very real physiological response.
Exactly. It's not a shortcut to fat loss, but it is a powerful physiological tool.
Okay, so lowering insulin and generating ketones creates this powerful, efficient state. But biology demands context, right?
Always.
Does this mechanism work the same way for everyone? Like, specifically, is a rigid, low carb approach uniquely stressful for women? Because you hear that a lot.
You do hear that, and we have to look at the different biological landscapes here.
Yeah.
Bickman uses a brilliant metaphor for this. He says male hormones are essentially a simple barbershop quartet.
A barbershop quartet,
Yeah, it's a nice tune, but it's very steady, very predictable day in and day out. Female hormones, however, are a complex 200-piece orchestra.
which makes sense.
Right. A woman's reproductive cycle entirely dictates her metabolic flexibility at any given moment.
So during the first half of the cycle, the follicular phase, estrogen is climbing and progesterone remains low. And chemically, estrogen promotes fat oxidation.
Yes, during this phase, women are literally fat-burning machines.
They produce 40 to 50% more free fatty acids than men do, which means they can actually transition into ketosis much faster and more efficiently than a man.
But then ovulation occurs, and the body shifts into the luteal phase. Progesterone spikes, and progesterone acts as a powerful hunger hormone.
Okay, so it changes the game.
Completely. It slightly raises the body's core temperature and metabolic demand, which chemically drives up hunger signals. So fasting or maintaining strict ketosis becomes significantly biologically harder.
Because that internal orchestra is playing a totally different tune.
Exactly. It's prioritizing energy intake for potential reproduction.
Yet, despite those shifting demands, this prevailing myth that keto is inherently harmful or systemically stressful to women is completely dismantled by the data.
Yeah, the UK study by Dr. Isabella Cooper is huge here.
Right. She took healthy women who were already adapted to a ketogenic diet, forced them onto a standard high-carb diet for 21 days to disrupt their metabolism, and then put them back on keto.
And they meticulously tracked cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, across all of those dramatic dietary shifts.
And what did they find?
The results showed an absolute flatline. There was no statistically significant increase in cortisol when the women transitioned back into ketosis.
None at all.
None. It thoroughly debunked the narrative that low-carb diets throw the female body into a unique state of physiological panic.
Think about how empowering this is for you as a listener. Instead of fighting your biology because some rigid diet book tells you to force a specific protocol every single day, what if you periodized your nutrition to match your internal orchestra?
That is the key. Why do we expect our daily fuel needs to be perfectly static when our hormonal landscape is entirely dynamic?
Exactly. You can lean into deep fat burning when your estrogen is priming your body for it, and you can give yourself grace and healthy carbs when progesterone is driving hunger.
That kind of dynamic adaptability is the ultimate hallmark of true metabolic health. And, Bickman actually outlines what a perfectly adapted metabolic day looks like for him, optimized for longevity, and keeping that insulin switch turned off.
Right. Let's get into his daily protocol. It starts incredibly early with a fasted, weighted walk, a ruck, followed immediately by a freezing ice bath.
I shiver just thinking about it. But the mechanism behind that morning shock is all about the circadian rhythm.
How so?
Well, in the winter months, when the sun rises late and you don't have natural light to wake up your brain, the extreme cold of the ice bath provides this massive jolt of adrenaline and noradrenaline.
So it's basically a chemical alarm clock.
Exactly. It aggressively sets the biological clock, ensuring that by the time evening rolls around, the nervous system is actually prepared to downshift into deep sleep.
Okay, that makes sense. Then, after the ice bath, he skips breakfast entirely, relying on yerba mate tea, which acts as a natural appetite suppressant. And around midday, he does a brief, intense resistance workout while still completely fasted, followed by a massive lunch heavy on protein and fat.
The fasted exercise is a critical lever here. If your goal is longevity and insulin sensitivity, not necessarily winning an Olympic medal, exercising in a fasted state forces your muscle tissue to rely heavily on its stored fat.
It's demanding that fuel.
Yeah, and more importantly, it upregulates the glucose receptors in your muscles, massively improving how efficiently your body clears sugar from the blood when you finally do eat later in the day.
So he wraps up with an early, socially normal dinner with his family. But his absolute non-negotiable golden rule is this: stop snacking in the evening. Going to bed after eating a bunch of carbohydrates is a physiological disaster.
It really is. If we track the nervous system cascade, it makes perfect sense. When you eat a late-night sugary snack, your blood glucose spikes.
Right.
In response, your body dumps a huge amount of insulin to clear it, which causes your blood sugar to crash below baseline. You become mildly hypoglycemic.
And the brain does not like that.
No, it interprets hypoglycemia as a life-threatening emergency, a literal famine state. So it instantly triggers this sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight-or-flight response.
We've all experienced this cascade. You eat a couple of cookies at 9 p.m., and by midnight, you are lying wide awake in bed. Your heart is pounding, you're sweating, your mind is racing with anxiety.
Yep, the cookie crash.
And it's all because your brain is reacting to a cookie crash with the exact same chemical panic as if you were being chased by a predator in the dark.
It's intense. You desperately need your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, to be active so you can sleep. But that late-night insulin spike completely sabotages the chemical switch.
And that late-night sympathetic panic destroys your deep sleep architecture, which leads to a brain that is chronically sleep-deprived.
And when that happens, its fundamental energy currency, a molecule called ATP, gets severely depleted. Which brings us to a highly surprising intervention for cognitive rescue.
Creatine.
Yes, creatine.
We normally associate creatine strictly with gym bros trying to build massive biceps, right? But the latest neuro research focuses entirely on the brain.
It's wild. When sleep-deprived individuals were given 10 to 15 grams of creatine, which is a dose significantly higher than the standard muscle-building recommendation, their cognitive function was completely rescued.
Because the creatine physically crosses the blood-brain barrier.
Exactly. It directly recycles the depleted ATP in your brain cells, giving them the raw energy they need to function despite the lack of sleep.
It's an incredibly potent tool for mental clarity. But while creatine serves as a functional rescue, we also have to look at the dark side of supplementation.
Right, the B vitamins warning.
There's a massive warning regarding something most of us assume is universally healthy. The mechanism here is wild. So if you look at the livestock industry, farmers want cattle to get as fat as possible, as cheaply as possible.
Makes sense for them.
Normally, it takes about 6 pounds of standard feed to generate 1 pound of animal growth. But when they pump that feed full of complex B vitamins, the metabolic ratio plummets to 2 pounds of feed for 1 pound of growth.
They effectively triple the fat storing efficiency of the animal.
Yes. And this fundamentally challenges how we view our modern fortified food supply. We are constantly sold the marketing line that B vitamins boost your metabolism, and they are synthetically pumped into almost every processed flour, cereal, and energy drink on the market.
But biologically speaking, making a cell highly efficient means it is incredibly good at trapping and storing energy.
Which is the opposite of what you want if you're trying to lose weight.
Exactly. If you're trying to lose weight and shrink your fat cells, you actually want an inefficient metabolism.
You want an engine that revs high but sits in neutral, just burning off fuel as heat without storing it. If we are constantly consuming hyper-fortified foods explicitly designed to make our cellular engines run at peak efficiency, we are inadvertently turning our own bodies into highly efficient, fat-storing feedlots.
It completely destroys the supplement industry's basic promise of boosting metabolism for weight loss.
It really shifts the paradigm, and it leads us directly into the most aggressive interventions people are using today when their metabolism is broken.
You're talking about the explosion of GLP-1 weight loss drugs, like Ozempic.
Yes. We have to impartially analyze the mechanism here. These drugs absolutely work, but they do it by chemically paralyzing the intestines, sometimes keeping decaying food in your stomach for 24 hours, and simultaneously altering the neural signals in your brain to kill carbohydrate cravings.
But the data reveals severe diminishing returns. The clinical timeline is really striking.
What happens over time?
Well, for the first 6 months, the psychological cravings for sweets plummet. But studies show that by the 2-year mark, those exact same cravings creep right back up to baseline.
So the brain just gets used to it.
Yes, the brain simply habituates and becomes deaf to the artificial hormone signal. This habituation is exactly why 70% of users in the US and UK quit the drug within 2 years. The therapeutic effects fade, but the constant low-grade nausea remains.
And the physical toll of that gastrointestinal paralysis is severe. Up to 40% of the massive weight lost on these drugs isn't fat. It's lean muscle mass and vital bone density.
Because the gut is so paralyzed, patients simply cannot absorb adequate protein or nutrients.
The body goes into a catabolic state, literally eating its own muscle and bone architecture to survive the pharmaceutical famine. Think about a 60-year-old woman taking this drug. She loses 40 pounds, then goes off it. Her fat will almost certainly return, but that lost bone density might be gone forever, setting her up for catastrophic fractures.
Which is precisely why the clinical focus is shifting to a completely different protocol, microdosing.
How does that work?
Instead of staying on a massive gut-paralyzing dose forever, the data suggests running a 90-day cycle of a very low dose. You use just enough of the drug to quiet the psychological food noise in the brain, without inducing the extreme gastrointestinal paralysis that causes the muscle wasting.
So it's treating the medication as a temporary bridge to behavioral change, rather than a permanent metabolic crutch.
Exactly. It gives you the psychological breathing room to establish a strict, sustainable low-carb habit, and then you taper off the drug entirely.
Speaking of how deeply context matters, there is a massive blinking safety warning about the ketogenic diet itself in the source material. It proves we cannot treat dietary rules as absolute religion.
Yes, the broader scientific context here involves a controversial but compelling theory pioneered by Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He suggests that cancer is fundamentally a metabolic mitochondrial disease driven by glucose fermentation.
Right. And under that framework, aggressively starving the body of glucose via a ketogenic diet is being actively explored as a powerful adjunct therapy to weaken tumor cells.
But the metabolic landscape is incredibly complex, and there's a real-life cautionary tale here.
The story of Mrs. L.
Yes, Mrs. L's husband attempted a strict ketogenic diet. Within just 8 hours of cutting his carbs, he was completely unconscious on the floor.
Just 8 hours?
8 hours. Paramedics had to save his life with an emergency intravenous glucose drip. It turned out he had an undiagnosed, rare neuroendocrine cancer called an insulinoma.
That's a tumor on his pancreas, right?
Yes, a tumor that constantly, uncontrollably secreted massive amounts of insulin. Let's track the dual starvation mechanism that caused him to collapse.
Okay.
Because he abruptly cut his dietary carbohydrates, his blood sugar naturally began to drop. But because his tumor refused to let his body stop pumping out insulin, his fat cells remained tightly locked.
So the high insulin completely blocked his liver's ability to undergo lipolysis and produce ketones.
Exactly. He was starving his brain of both possible fuel sources simultaneously.
The tumor's insulin blocked the ketones, and his diet eliminated the glucose.
His brain literally ran out of physical energy, and he passed out. This is the ultimate proof that your biology dictates your rules.
Wow.
If something feels catastrophically wrong, like losing consciousness after just 8 hours of fasting, it is never a lack of willpower. It is your body waving a massive physiological red flag that your internal chemistry is misaligned.
It perfectly encapsulates the need for nuance. We've explored some incredible physiological terrain today. We've seen exactly how insulin, rather than the simple calorie, acts as the master gatekeeper for our fat cells.
We've tracked how ketones serve as both a premium high-octane fuel for our heart and brain and a signaling molecule that physically dilates our blood vessels.
Building on that, we've broken down how women's shifting hormonal cycles chemically dictate entirely different metabolic strategies from men, and why treating the human body like a simple closed-system math equation sets you up for inevitable hormonal rebellion and failure.
Which brings us back to the philosophical anchor Dr. Bickman uses to frame all of this biology. He refers to the human body as a mortal tabernacle.
That's a beautiful way to say it.
It really is. And if we ground that in evolutionary science, it makes perfect sense. Our genes evolved over millions of years for an ancient world of intense scarcity. Our bodies are perfectly adapted to store energy efficiently to survive famines.
But today, we live in a modern world of engineered, hyper-palatable abundance.
Right. Your body isn't a broken machine. It's doing exactly what it was brilliantly programmed to do. We just have to learn how to send it the right signals to navigate this new environment.
It completely reframes your relationship with your biology. You are the one operating the switchboard.
Absolutely.
And that leaves you with a final thought to mull over today. You can officially put the calorie calculator away. If your metabolism isn't just a basic accounting ledger, but rather a highly sensitive, constantly adapting communication network that is listening to what you eat, when you sleep, and how you manage stress.
What messages are you sending your cells today?
Are you commanding them to store energy and panic, or are you giving them the definitive signal to burn, to adapt, and to thrive? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take this knowledge, throw away the old math, and go rewrite your metabolic code. We'll catch you next time.